Jesus Christ reveals through Gottfried Mayerhofer. Secrets of Life. Chapter 22, January 14th, 1875. Human life. Thus says the Lord. Many times the plaintive sound has reached my ear, coming from a person who accused me of injustice, of harshness, because his life and the events determining it had not turned out according to his beliefs, hopes, and desires. Often I have heard the entreaty of an oppressed soul, as, battling with all the misery of human life, driven by the greatest pain, it calls out, "But Father and Lord, what have I done for you to persecute me with all possible tribulations, while showering others with good fortune abundantly, without knowing why they have actually deserved it?" Thus, and in 1,000 other ways, complaints are raised against my fairness, against my words, saying that I am love and unable to punish, etc. against me, as an implacable judge, a strict but not loving father. Complaints are raised which on the surface, according to human concepts, even seem to be justified. So, let us look closely at these complaints and accusations, and also discuss the question as to why there are in human society so many stations, professions and trades, where there are in the human heart so many inclinations towards one or the other calling. Since I have explained to you often enough the spirit life after death, I will also solve for you these questions relating to the human life so near you. You will then, firstly, stop accusing me, and secondly, you will realize what the goal of human life is, just as it is, and not as you would like to design it. It was always that which he could least understand which inspired most to carry out investigations. Searching in the distance, he spent time and effort to elucidate that which could really have found its solution in his closest proximity. This applies also to human social life, to the mutual relationship of people with one another, where conditions have arisen, which, although it did not make them, I certainly foresaw and allowed, but always with the proviso to use everything for my great purpose of creation. Before I can proceed with the explanation to the above-mentioned complaints and questions, I must go far back and bring again closer to your spiritual eyes things which so far you have regarded only from a one-sided, that is, human viewpoint, where human prejudice still turns the scale when judging the same. Prior to considering man in his relationship to his fellow man, we have to ask, what actually is man? Of what does he consist, and what is his mission on this earth globe? This, for the time being, clearly understood, will help us to more closely elucidate the social conditions of the human race. As you know, man consists of three things, namely, of body, soul, and spirit. Well, this is how you have on the whole grasped these things, when you say, the body is matter, the soul is taken from the material spiritual, bound because of the fall of the one great spirit, and the spirit is a divine spark, which is to elevate and spiritualize the soul. The latter in turn, through its refinement, will bring also the elements of the material body onto a higher level, so that everything can gradually proceed on its gamut of perfection, as it had been decreed in advance in the great plan of creation. In these conclusions already lies the first erroneous concept, since you only consider your own spirit as endowed with the divine spark, that is to ennoble everything. For had you not always, often unconsciously, aristocratic ideas which you want to apply to my person, you would easily realize and understand that everything created is fundamentally divine and must be infinite, since it is descended from me, has originated from me, and must again return to me. The body, a material tool during your lifespan, is composed of the same noblest, most sublime elements of my spiritual self, as are soul and spirit. However, these elements are bound in matter and coerced to manifest only in the manner allowed by their momentary arrangement. These most subtle spiritual elements, which help in the building of the bodies already in the womb, also struggle for perfection, completion, expressing their tendency in the form of the body insofar as a plastic, well-defined form can express a spiritual principle. They seek, through their calling in human life, to supplement what higher spiritual elements in the soul will then develop further spiritually. They are the helpers, the collaborators in the great spiritual building of a perfected divine idea, just as no architect can build a house on his own, but requires 1,000 hands, which, however, mind you, do not work in a machine-like manner, but which, likewise, again directed by other intelligences, help to execute the entire edifice. Thus, it is always the formative, creative forces which work in man, as well as in everything created, in the inert rock, the vegetating plant, and the animal kingdom, endowed with self-awareness, which contribute towards the ennoblement, the refinement of the whole. On the other hand, the kind and species is still subject to 1,000 other diverse influences, where the capabilities originally bestowed on them cannot reach perfection. And so, everywhere, despite the common gender and origin, the end results will be as diverse as there are created beings in the entire space of creation. The soul, as an offshoot or descendant of a great fallen light-bearer, first had to have an appropriate envelopment, and furthermore, a higher spiritual principle implanted into it. This drives it to not only complete its education here, but to serve, after the shedding of any mortal envelopment, as the basis for a spiritual world. Therefore, the soul of the smallest infusorian, just as that of man, is always urged to first fulfill its life purpose here, in keeping with its envelopment, and an unrealized spiritual, which you call instinct or nature, which opens the way to perfection in other forms and under other conditions. The spirit in man is the same as that in the last rock, but there it is confronted with a more orderly organization, which does not oppose its actual sphere of action so much, but is even created to follow it in all its endeavors. Thus, it is not true that man alone was endowed with a spirit spark of myself, for the divine spark is in everything. Only there the body is more adapted to the spiritual and completely conforms to the greatest expansion of the spiritual forces. Look, a monotonous landscape, a boring life, shows you sufficiently that life exists only where there is change, diversity. For by the very fact that not everything is on the same level and progressing at the same pace, life is a stimulating endeavor to attain that which, although destined for all, cannot be achieved in every imaginable way. Diversity is the basis of life. Diverse are the worlds, diverse their beings, and diverse even the road they have to walk to perfection. Without this diversity, no life, no movement, no progress are possible. Only with the germ to form always something new but superior could a creation be effected, a creation that redounds to its creator's honor, and which, like he, can carry the germ of infinity within it. Thus, you have to grasp this entire visible and invisible world, beginning with the smallest atom in cosmic space and ending with my great spirit realm, if ever you wish to understand why I created all this, and why I created it thus and not otherwise. With me, it is unthinkable that improvements, repairs or modifications could ever occur, for they are a consequence of errors, wrong conclusions, which are impossible with God. Therefore, let go of your humanly limited ideas. The world is as I am describing it to you, almost daily uncovering for you one secret of creation after another. Thereby, you may learn to realize that your life's purpose is totally different from the one you try to construe, wishing even for the means to effect this in conformity with your physical, but not your spiritual nature and destiny. So you see, body, soul, and spirit are carriers of my divine spark. And as the diverse manner of expression in and through the same again makes mankind diversified, so also with the increased contact among people, this diversity of capabilities must bring about diverse professions and trades, which on the whole necessary for communal life, needed diverse arrangements. In another word, I have already told you that everything created, beginning with the first spiritual atoms, absorbs various substances and must therefore manifest in various ways. In man, who, composed of all the elements of this earth, represents the last member or compendium of the whole earth globe, this diversity of all that which is spiritual must be even more pronounced. For he, in the manner of communication of his thoughts and ideas, superior to everything else, is also capable of letting his own spirituality shine through and make use of it. Hence also the inclination for one or the other occupation, partly through the impression from early youth, partly through the elements prevailing as inherited spiritual possession during the act of procreation. These naturally exert their influence, and were bound to show their influence also in life, which happened mostly where the greatest obstacles to their gratification arose. Thus, with the growing demands of people, analogous with the striving for comfort and the urge of passions, a great number of occupations came into being, meant to render man's material life as pleasant as possible. This need aroused in people a love for individual artifacts, and they, for the sake of a pleasant life, in turn inspired others to comply with the demand for their making, everyone in accordance with his perception. So, gradually there developed competition among the gifted, and out of this grew the most diversified classification of all ranks, where everyone tried to win with the help of the other, so as to live comfortably and gratify his passions. It is easy to see that with such competition, abuses occur through jealousy, greater ability, good or evil intentions. In short, through the pressure of all human passions. They in turn had their effect on the social life of the individual, where, always battling and struggling between want and plenty, your whole present human society grew up, for it was only the temporal life that caused such conditions. According to the moral laws, the lowest and the highest ranking person on earth could be inspired by the same principles, since ethics and my divine two laws are alike for both peasant and king. However, since the divine laws, which are higher than the earthly laws, are not subject to change and do not allow various interpretations, the very incongruities arising from the social life are often the reason why people accuse me, when they themselves, mind you, generally speaking, are at fault. It is true that the peasant child has as many human rights as the prince, crowned already in the cradle. In my eyes, both are equal, but the abilities dormant in the one are often very different from those of the other, and each brings a great deal of his future life's course with him into the world as a possession inherited from his parents. Added to this will be his own part, to either his advantage or disadvantage. Different are all created beings, diverse the paths they have to walk, and for this very reason also diverse the apparent course of luck or ill luck, which they have to experience either through their own fault or through no fault of their own. If behind this material life there were not a great spiritual one, if there were not the morally divine of myself, which is inherent in everything, human nature would have sunk long ago to the level of the animal and below the same. For man, always only gratifying his passions, tried to exploit everything on earth for their appeasement. However, material things can only give temporal and often only momentary bliss, because spiritual elements that have become coarse and dark cannot unite with sublime, subtle ones, so that all worldly happiness is of short duration. And so, man, driven by thousands of calamities, of necessity comes to realize the material world is not sufficient. There must be still another one, and in the end, despite all his denials, he has to confess. There must be someone who created this visible as well as the surmised invisible world, so that if he wants to still his inner urge, he is forced to create his own God. For in adversity, no worldly thing can serve as a substitute, since man, as spiritual product, was only for a short time clothed in a material envelopment in which to shed, during his trial life, the coarseness still clinging to him, so as to advance to higher spiritual things. Everything you see has a spiritual basis, higher aspirations than merely the transient life. For this reason, you must consider everything from a spiritual viewpoint. The sounds of wailing reaching me because of afflictions and accidents only bear witness to the failure to understand the human conditions, to a misunderstanding as to how far the material, if one believes too much in it, can and must only call forth spiritual evil. Many people have deprived themselves of the solace of a spiritual life beyond this material one. They believed in people instead of in me, who even deemed it fitting, personally descending to this earth globe, in the universal process of salvation, not to forget them too. Therefore, when complaints and remonstrations occur, criticizing my role, it shows clearly on how weak a foundation the opinion about the world as it really is rests. All people cannot be born in the same conditions. All cannot be endowed with the same talents. There must be diversity, since in that very diversity there is life and progress. Moreover, many spirits from other worlds want to absolve the probation school to become my son on your earth. Naturally, they do not arrive here without an endowment from those worlds, and sometimes they have a certain preference for one thing or the other, not knowing that it had once been applied by them in better and more refined organizations. These spirits, and there are many, will one day in the future find out and have it explained to them why many a spiritual urge, of which they were unaware, always drove them to this or that occupation, which, though material, had much spiritual hidden under this cover. I, as God and Supreme Love, created the world, created the individual suns and earths. But this love must not be judged according to your ideas of love. This love is a totally different one, which you cannot possibly understand. Nevertheless, I shun no means of giving you a foreknowledge of it, since only from the cognition of this love, all that exists, as well as the events occurring in your human life, can be properly evaluated. In this respect, my love is universal, since it must only pursue the great purposes of a creation to which all others have to submit. Love, as I understand it, forgets neither the worm nor the senseless stone, and even less the larger and more finely organized beings. But this love has other laws, other intentions, other purposes. Were my love not as it is, I would have to be a vengeful God, as so many people among you would like to make me, a severe judge, implacable when dealing out punishment, all attributes which you have learned in your law books, but are not found in my law book. It is precisely out of love that I transform all evil that human beings do to one another into something good. Out of love I do not judge, do not fling any anathema or thunderbolt between quarreling people. They create their own evil, and my concern is only to let the comforting word from a better world flow into the heart of the oppressed. Happy those who take heed, but this unfortunately is rarely the case. That is why these complaints and recriminations are made against me. However, for all that, the material as well as spiritual world remains the same. They do not change their laws, but the human being offending against them only metes out his own punishment. That which on the surface is undeserved suffering is often, as an illness, a necessary medicine, where, generally speaking, the most bitter medicines are the most effective. Not that I sent them, for I could help, but I do not do it, because my views and my purpose concerning the human souls differ from those existing in the imagination of the oppressed human child. No human being dies because I will it. No disaster occurs because I will it. No one is born poor, and no one in rich circumstances according to my idea. All these I merely allow. Man is free, and can thus do as he likes. Through an orderly life he can live longer. Through a disorderly life he can shorten it. Both fortune and misfortune, coming over people through their own wrong decisions, are a school for mankind, where they are educated for me, so that I can thereby spiritually influence them. That means that finally they listen to my voice. This is something which also ought to have happened sooner, but did not happen. Whether born rich or poor, everyone in his station in life can become my child, gradually maturing for another, more enduring world of the spirit. His poverty can help him gain rich spiritual treasures, whereas the one born rich can lose his material riches without being compensated by spiritual ones. Everywhere I find means whereby to attain my ends. I merely use the circumstances without creating them. This I leave to man, who loves to proudly call himself the Lord of the earth, and fancies to rule and subjugate everything, while sailing like a weather vane through all the spiritual currents flowing through the universe, soon unawarely drifting in this, soon in that direction, who is always seeking his temporal material happiness, while disregarding the fact that it can rarely ever be reconciled with the other, which is the more enduring spiritual bliss. Therefore, my children, do not accuse me. I am he who writes all the sins into the sand, who neither curses nor hates or is vengeful, but who has always been, and still is, ready to pour balm on gaping wounds. I have never been an unjust God, no more than a strict father towards my children. As you are now, I did not create you, but you have made yourselves what you are. And if I now come and take over your guidance personally, it is because things are going too far, because I cannot stand by watching as mankind, totally misunderstanding and disregarding themselves and their whole future existence, are without faith, love and fear before me. I must now apply all the means available to lead back the lost to the right road. The spiritual element is being pushed too far into the background. It is too much forgotten and denied. That is why all these abuses, disasters in every direction, and when many a sufferer cries out to me, a sign that he at least still believes in me, it is up to me to show him with few words that his suffering does not come from me, but that if he wants solace for his tribulation, he can find it only with me. That is why this word, for many a thing might occur which would cause the first mentioned accusations to be heard also from you. In order to prevent this, and so that you, before you open your mouth to complain and raise your voice to me, you may consider who is to be accused. I, the ever-loving Father, or he, the straying human being, who only strives for the gratification of his passions. So, accept this word, and it will again let you take a tranquil glance into the chaotic bustle of mankind itself. Amen.